was rumored that a baby recently born in the neighborhood was handed over to these women. Her aunt, who was widowed at the age of 28, was a melancholy figure who stood at the back for all auspicious occasions and pujas wearing white. But the thing is that everyone in our generation today, they don't. She had come out of this stereotypical Indian family. She had learned, she had grown, she had understood. But today I, like most of my generation, with no big opportunities to make an impactful change, may be made to feel insignificant. I'm reminded of the house help I grew up with, who was one of many teenage uneducated girls sent out to earn for their families, whom I could only help by teaching how to read and comprehend English. Hello everyone. Today I am going to start off with a story. This is a story of a young woman marching in a protest, raising her right fist, shouting slogans, and braving a sea of people. A rare sight of unity, camaraderie, and intent. As she trudged along with difficulty, she was regularly being tugged at on her left shoulder from a bag. This red bag was perhaps the reason why she was there. As she was marching, she would stop and look inside this bag every second instant to reassure herself of its safety, and perhaps to even drive the strength to carry on despite the constant backache and an engorged bosom. She found a place to sit, surrounded by a group of young people, who gave her a candle and a placard to hold, and then quite curiously looked at the contents of the red bag, only to smile in the somber and highly electrified atmosphere. As she was sitting there, lost in thought, not knowing what was written on the placard, she was transported back to a day of her childhood, when she was being extremely naughty. Her nanny had threatened her that if she didn't behave, she'd be sent to the dark house down the lane. Now this was the ultimate threat. No child ever even dared to look in that direction. That was the house where the strange, large women lived. They sounded like men, had thick stubbles, and yet wore bright, flashy saris with colorful bindis. It was rumored that a baby recently born in the neighborhood was handed over to these women. Now, no one talked about the baby or its parents or why they would do such a thing. There was this eerie silence about it. But her friends told her about this huge celebration that went on throughout the night at their house. Isn't it ironic that a baby who was not accepted by their family, so much so that they were thrown out of it, and that they were not only accepted but welcomed and celebrated by those tagged as abnormal by our so called progressive community? Now, many years later, having completed her education abroad, now embarking on her chosen career, she decided to visit her nanny once again. As she entered the narrow bylane of her nanny's old Delhi home, she stopped. She froze in fright at the sight of the dark house down the lane. She quickly turned and rushed into her nanny's house, and also left quite earlier than she had planned to. She was disturbed. Her childhood fear had returned. She now knew the women living in that house as hijras. She had encountered them at almost every traffic stop in Delhi, quickly rolling up her window to avoid them. Now, this moment of reflection, it brought about a pivotal shift in her outlook, and perhaps it also formed the bedrock of her photographic career. She couldn't place when this behavior of apathy and insensitivity had crept into her personality. As far as she could remember, she was brought up in an open and liberal household. They'd spent her formative years in America, as she would proudly imagine. And yet, she decided that she had to look at her family's attitude towards the people around her with a very objective lens. But there were red flags everywhere. Her aunt, who was widowed at the age of 28, was a melancholy figure who stood at the back for all auspicious occasions and pujas wearing white. Her two cousin sisters from the village who suffered from a form of intellectual disability, who made fun of by other cousins and made to do the menial chores. The bhaiyaji who cleaned their car was given tea or water in a steel tumbler instead of the regular crockery they used. An effeminate boy in the neighborhood was jeered at by other boys, and she was his only friend there. She now understood and realized that she had become a victim, an accomplice of these social oddities, despite not being an insensitive person at all. She realized, now that she had realized, she had to break this behavior, she had to take a stand against it. But that now it seemed insurmountable. Because this meant going against everyone she held dear and sometimes even her own slightly unrecognizable self. Now she'd begun her career in advertising photography. But she realized that her true calling didn't lie in a studio with makeup artists and models. She realized that she had to help people. That her true calling it lay on the streets of India, of South Asia. The next 20 years of her life saw her canvassing orphanages of Delhi, widow ashrams at Vrindavan, LGBTQI groups, um, the slums, the maternity hospitals in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, many parts of South Asia, the psychiatric hospitals, red light districts everywhere. Now, she she'd made an impact. But the thing is that everyone in our generation today, they don't. She had come out of this stereotypical Indian family. She had learned, she had grown, she had understood. But today I, like most of my generation, with no big opportunities to make an impactful change, may be made to feel insignificant. But when I stand by the marginalized, the less privileged, or when I even look at people without prejudice, or stand up to bullies, I am often asked, what does it matter to you? And I'm reminded of those many kids with special needs I had met during a winter I spent in Kerala. The ones I spent hours in a river with, just swimming with them, teaching them, guiding them, laughing with them, shouting with them, crying with them, playing with them. I'm reminded of that young blind kid in my class, Aman, who was always left out. Like the teacher tried to include him, of course, but in the breaks, it's not the same to be left sitting in the classroom. I'm reminded of that weak kid, Aryan, who wasn't just neglected in school activities but also playgroup activities, the casual ones. Why? Because he couldn't articulate his thoughts or because he had a cheap old plastic pencil box. I'm reminded of the house help I grew up with, who was one of many teenage uneducated girls sent out to earn for their families, whom I could only help by teaching how to read and comprehend English. But most of all, I'm reminded of my mother, the mother braving that cold December evening of 2012 while being pushed around with others, not stopping, marching on, while I was tugging at her left shoulder, smiling at her radiant face, knowing I am safe. And today, as I stand here in front of you, talking of empathy and courage, I am constantly being tugged by the memory of a doctor in a hospital, hoping that we summon the courage and the empathy to form the thin red line and say no more. I hope that I am not standing in a protest 20 years from now, carrying my daughter in a small red bag. I am Azah Imran Kokiloo, Class 7 student from All Saints College, Nainital. Thank you.